chin. It's going to tickle, but you're not allowed to laugh.
You would never know it by Dr. Michelle Clayton's happy demeanor.
Good job.
But this forensic pediatrician has seen the worst of this world on the most innocent of victims.
This is another child whose parents brought him into the emergency department saying that he had run backward and ran into the iron. But when you look at the number of impression marks that are on his back, you know, some of these impression marks were made by pressing it very firmly into his skin. You can actually see steam holes and the point of the iron. Clearly not an accident.
Clearly a case of abuse, like almost 1 million other children every year in the U.S., according to the Department of Health and Human Services. When I think of child abuse, it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around this. I think this is something that happens somewhere else, rarely, but this is a big problem, isn't it?
It's very big. It's something that our society and our communities deal with every day. It crosses all boundaries. It exists in families of all levels of income. It exists in families of all color, of all backgrounds.
Lori Hoggs, the director of a unique child abuse program through Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters in Norfolk, Virginia. It's part of a national model for finding, treating, and prosecuting cases, and it's different in 2 ways. First of all, it acts as a central command, bringing all of the experts together for meetings under one roof. From police to prosecutors, from mental health to social service workers. But most importantly, what makes this program different is that it puts the child first. I also understand that the child only has to go through one interview, just one time, so they're not interviewed over and over and over again by multiple law enforcement agencies and social services where they're traumatized over and over again.
Our hope is that the child only has to be interviewed once or a minimal amount of times. The fewest interviews, the best in terms of what's best for children.
What is this? What's this one?
And that begins with a forensic interviewer, Kelly Bober, in a room where everything has a purpose. Rules for structure. A teddy bear for comfort.
I tell kids we named him Softy.
Markers and paper, because a picture really can be worth 1,000 words. How many interviews like this have you handled?
Over 1,000. When I'm with the children, I'm neutral, and I have to be, because if I react to their statements, they may pull back and say this isn't okay to tell.
Right.
So it's usually after the interviews that I feel it.
And all of this is happening while maybe law enforcement, police officers, whoever else is behind this window.
Right. We have the main investigators behind the mirror, and they watch the interview live, and we do tape all of our interviews so that there's an accurate record of the child's statements and how the questions were asked. And investigators take that into their possession when they leave.
And they talk to you in your ear, in an earpiece as you're doing all of this.
Right. During the interview, if there's something specific that they need me to go back to clarify, or if there's more information that they need on a certain incident, there may be forensic evidence out there that they need to go gather and they need to know where it is, or they might need the information so they can get a search warrant. They may ask me to go back to something to clarify it.
Kelly, we need more information about how many times and the location.
The program also requires more information on the parents and caretakers. And that's where clinical psychologist Dr. Jane Hollingsworth steps in.
It's amazing that that we all tend to think it's some faceless person somewhere, but as a matter of fact, it could be the clerk who checks you out at the grocery store, it could be the Little League coach, it could be a teacher, it could be the man down the street.
Another room is set up to evaluate the parents. It begins with an interview and continues with observation through another two-way mirror.
But you would think that if you're being observed with your child, you'd certainly be on your best behavior, and yet impulsive parents sometimes can't hold it together for the entire hour. We have seen parents strike children. We have seen them take all the snacks away from the children and eat them themselves. We've seen them tease the child until they're crying and then laugh about it. We've seen them call them profane names. And then we've seen a number of really wonderful parents and a lot of really positive parent-child interactions too.
which can help rule out false accusations of abuse, since all cases that come through this program have been brought here by law enforcement or the courts. But when there is probable cause, much of the evidence is also gathered here with Dr. Clayton and the physical exam.
You start out with the things that the child's used to, but even before that, the nurses really help to put the children at ease. They play, you know, we have a DVD player here in the clinic, and so they let them pick a DVD.
Once again, it's all about the child.
What happens after our services are provided is our staff, the medical staff, the case management staff, and the mental health staff work together to make joint recommendations to the agencies that have the ability to make decisions to impact what's going to happen to these kids.
A lot of people at home are probably thinking, I see all this, I see the problem, it's horrifying. What can I do?
Well, the first thing is if you happen to suspect that a child is being abused, whether it's in a school setting, in a grocery store, as a neighbor, in your family, to report that. But sometimes just not ignoring it is doing something.
What about for a child who may be watching us today, who's listening to you, and who is a victim of abuse? What does a little child do when they feel like they really have no voice?
The first thing they need to know is that there are people that care. And even though if it seems like they look around them and there are people in their family or in their school or in their church that don't care, there are people that care. And they need to look and find the person that they trust the most, that's closest to them, that is not close to the person that is hurting them, and they need to talk about what happened. Sometimes, if it's hard to trust an adult, then find a friend. Find a friend whose family that you trust or that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's your 10-year-old best friend that lives next door, but whoever it is, to be able to talk about it, because there are people that care. And even though you may have said something before and nobody responded, sometimes you have to say it more than once.